Hello, folks. I'm Jeffrey Darty, the Christian Whistleblower, and this is Apostle Paul Antichrist, our series on how the Apostle Paul hijacked the original Yeshua message and turned it into a fear and guilt-based control matrix under which we still live. It's the basis of all Roman Catholicism. It's the basis of all Roman Protestantism, and we're breaking it down for you from my book, Apostle Paul Antichrist. Came out a couple of years ago, forward by George Norrie, 350 odd pages. And we've been talking, this is the fifth installment in the series. We've talked about and proved how Paul was a Roman citizen. We've talked about and proved how Paul was of the family of Herod. We've talked about and proved from Paul's own words that he was a Pharisee. And I've told you that Paul was a compatriot, a friend of Nero, and that he also knew Yeshua. So today I want to show you and tell you how Paul knew the infamous Nero. Now, I have said that Paul and Nero were friends. That's probably stretching the term beyond the actual breaking point, because these two psychopaths, Paul and Nero, it's unlikely that either one of them really had ever in their lives a true friend, but they were as close to being friends as anything or as anyone was in their lives. And they did come in contact with each other. They knew each other. They were friendly with each other. They worked with one another. And it was Paul and Nero, along with Herod, along with Caiaphas, and the reluctant assistance even of Pilate, which established and first created this fear and guilt control matrix, fear and guilt-based control matrix that has come to be known today as Christianity in both its Roman Protestant and Roman Catholic forms. So you wonder, how in the world did Paul and Nero meet? And many people accuse me of making that up, but it's very, very easy to find, and it's in the book, so I'll just come to you right out of the book. Paul was the student of a man named Athenodorus. That was Paul's teacher in Tarsus, at the university in Tarsus. Paul, we'll call him Saul, or we'll call him Saul Paul, or anyway. He was in university at Tarsus, and Athenodorus was Paul's teacher. Athenodorus was Paul's instructor. Athenodorus was, Saul was a protege, if you will, of Athenodorus. And Athenodorus was a protege of a man named Seneca. Now, Seneca was the man that had taught Athenodorus. Athenodorus was the man that was teaching Paul. And Seneca had come to Tarsus for a series of lectures. Seneca, of course, lived and taught in Rome. And Seneca was the tutor for many of the city's elite, the city's finest, including some that had potential paths to becoming future emperors. And of course, when you're a person like Paul, this thrilled him because he loved to rub shoulders with the rich and powerful. So Paul in the Jewish world was tutored by Gamaliel. This would have been sometime after, when he was probably in his teens when he was tutored by Gamaliel in Jerusalem at the temple. And here he's in Tarsus at university, being tutored by Athenodorus, who had been taught by Seneca. And one of Seneca's prized students, if you will, was a young man who was said to be definitely on his way to being emperor. It was a young man that seemed preternaturally cogent for his age. Some people say maybe he had an old soul. He seemed like he was beyond his age. And the person that, of course, we're talking about was the young Nero. So think about the confluence of things taking place there. Paul's teacher had learned from Nero's teacher, and then Paul's teacher's teacher came to Tarsus to give a series of lectures. Nero comes along with him, and Nero and Paul met one another, and it's, I guess, a little bit of conjecture to say that they became friends, but we know, and we'll go on and continue to prove as this series continues, that not only did they meet in Tarsus, not only were they students in the same school of thought, if you will, not only was Paul taught by the teacher who was taught by Nero's teacher. Remember, Seneca taught Nero, and Athenodorus, Paul's teacher, had been taught and had become a teacher through the auspices of Seneca. So Paul and Nero were taught the same basic philosophies. They were taught the same basic subject matter. Of course, Paul adding to his subject matter the teachings of the temple and of Judaism. So it's very, very interesting. And it gets even more interesting. And I wasn't going to talk about this today, but I see we have a little bit of time. So that's still coming out of Apostle Paul Antichrist. When Paul was in the temple studying to become a Pharisee, and actually many believe he was being groomed for the high priest, there was a daughter of the current high priest. Her name was Poppaea Sabina, and her and Paul became very, very close. They had dreamed and talked together of leaving Jerusalem and going and traveling the world. And she had liked to hear the stories that Paul would talk about of being down in Tarsus and throughout the rest of the empire. But yet, when Paul was offered or told that he was going to be groomed to be the high priest, well, Paul decided that he did not want to leave Jerusalem, and that did not sit well with Poppaea. She wanted to get out of Jerusalem, so she actually snuck out, left Jerusalem, went to Rome, and it's interesting because this kind of gives you some insight into why did Paul hate women so much. And if you're stupid enough and ignorant enough to challenge me on that statement, we'll be glad to show you the biblical proof where Paul says women should shut up when they're in church, that women are only created to be sexual servants of men, and that a woman can never have any authority over a man. So shut your yap. Don't even give me that garbage, because Paul did hate women. Paul was a horrible misogynist, and when you look back at his one love of his life, and Paul was physically disfigured. He wasn't very attractive whatsoever. Some say he was hunchbacked, and he was just not very physically attractive. He had some maladies and some deformities, and had very, very poor eyesight. So this one woman that said she loved him, this one woman that he had gained acceptance from, dumped him, quote unquote, and that's probably the reason why he hated women. But the funny thing is, he also probably hated women because Mary Magdalene had an exalted place among the apostles, and he could never gain acceptance among their number. But when she left him, even though it's his own fault, he could have kept his word and gone with her, but because his own ego and his own desire for advancement made it impossible for Poppaea to stay, she went to Rome, went into the theater, and truth being oh so much stranger than fiction in reality, she wound up being married to, you got it, Nero. And you tell me that Paul and Nero didn't know each other. My friends, stick around. You're going to learn some things. You're going to learn that truth is stranger than fiction. You're going to learn that what you've been told and sold for 2,000 years is nothing but a horrible, enslaving lie. And this is the right place if you want to learn. This is the right place if you want to understand. This is the right place if you want to unindoctrinate yourself. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, inviting you to unindoctrinate yourself.